The following short story is based on an actual experience by one of us, or one of our close friends. Please enjoy responsibly. The elk who became a deer. The sun was barely cresting the horizon, not yet painting the clouds a crimson hue in the cool morning air. Even though his footsteps were soft, there were still leaves just below the morning frost. Every other footstep was a subtle crunch. He slid the wire clasp over the fence post and stepped through the gate, mindful to relatch it in case the cows were still grazing. He moved slowly and purposefully through the tall aspen and poplars, carefully eyeing the field to his right for movement. He paused every so often to look around and wait, hoping to see some sign of elk, or anything for that matter. The daylight slowly breathed life into the forest as he pushed his way through, his eyes continuously scanning the sparse woods as he headed towards the small, gentle ridge. As he emerged from the tree line, he squatted down. Before him lay a small but sprawling valley, peppered with bushes, grasslands, and rolling hills, with a small seasonal creek in the center. That's when he heard it. The piercing bugle of a bull elk echoing through the valley. Another one returned the call. His heart stopped. The hairs on his arms stood at attention, and he slowly reached for his binoculars. As his eyes came into focus, he could see the hillsides across the small valley. He slowly glassed the scrub brush and flatlands, looking for any sign of movement. There, just at the base of the far tree line, the distinctive white bum and brown body, an elk. And another. His eyes darted from one elk to the other as the whole herd phased into view. They were about 500 meters away, which was too far for an ethical shot. He had to move closer. He quickly scurried down the hillside, trying his best to stay behind small brushes or clumps of sprouting poplar. As he neared the bottom, he once again pressed the binos to his face. The elk were moving further into the trees. This gave him the opportunity to move a little more freely. He sloughed down the bank of the small creek and hopped a few rocks to the other side. He once again peered through his binoculars. All of the elk had moved into the trees. He climbed up out of the tall grass, picked up the pace, and made good time as he crossed to the edge of the tree line. His breath was heavy and his heart was racing as he leaned up against a large tree. The aspen, poplar, and occasional spruce were dense enough to provide cover, but also sparse enough that he could see 100 meters or so through the gaps in the trunks. He stealthily moved through the trees. Then all of a sudden, his heart jumped. The sound of an elk bugle seemed to cut through the streams of sunlight as they speckled through the woods. This time, the bugle was closer. He peered through the brush and could just make out the shape of some elk in a small, sunlit clearing through the trees ahead. He swallowed hard and moved closer, trying to get a better view. The morning sun had melted the frost, softening the leaves on the ground. He could move more quietly and, more importantly, quickly. As he neared the clearing, he spotted the herd of elk moving through the trees up the hillside. As he exited the trees, he saw it wasn't a clearing at all, but a cut line running all the way up the hill. The majority of the elk had moved back into the trees as they trudged along up the hillside, but one was still in the cut line, a bull. He was about 100 meters away and facing the opposite direction. The hunter raised his rifle slowly, quietly chambering around. He tucked the butt into the nook of his shoulder and peered down the scope. The elk was dead center in view, but it was still facing straight up the cut line, presenting only its tail end. He quietly clicked off his safety and waited. He let a slow breath out, and the elk began to turn his head and step broadside. Crack! The deafening sound of a large branch breaking pierced his left ear. Snap! Crunch! Crack! Another and another. The elk startled and took off into the trees. The hunter turned to his left to see a 4x4 white-tailed buck come charging down the hillside, branches flying as he skidded to a halt near the far side of the cut line, about 20 meters away. Hot air billowed out of his nostrils as he snorted and grunted. Chunks of ground sprayed up as the angry buck pounded and scraped with his hooves. The hunter briefly turned his gaze to the cut line. The elk was gone. Once again, he locked eyes with the buck. It held fast, head down, snorting and staring. The elk had gotten away, but this was a nice buck, and he did have a whitetail tag in his backpack. He raised his rifle until the deer's fierce expression filled the crosshairs. He let out another slow breath as the buck exerted one final irate grunt. He squeezed the trigger. It wasn't the hunt he'd hoped for, but it was successful nonetheless. Hey, nobody. Don't forget to check out mutteringpines.com for our line of apparel and follow us on social and anywhere you listen to or watch your favorite podcasts. And remember, keep on chooching.